Hello, everyone. We're going to start. We start 5 minutes late just to allow everyone to attend to our side events. This is the last session of the day, so thank you very much for being with us, especially for the people attending online at distance. Thank you for being here. We are in Monaco, in the Total Room, to speak about the Mediterranean Island Collective today, an initiative which is financed by MAVA Foundation and which is led by IUCN Med and PIM Initiative with the support of the French Coastal Agency, the Conservatoire du Littoral, Maries Foundation, Conservative Collective, and also WWF Greece. Thank you for being with us. Next slide, please. Can we go on? Yeah, thank you. Just some remark about the rules. If you need translation, I think most of us will be speaking in English today. At least the panelists. So use the button interpretation if you need one. Please put your full name in the Zoom boxes just to allow us to know who's speaking. We will try here also when we will be speaking to present ourselves. I will doing it now. I'm Mathieu THEVENET from the Mediterranean Small Island Initiative. I will be animating this session. Please be informed that the discussion are currently recorded, and we ask you to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. This is an interactive session. We want you to give your feedback and your knowledge about marine protected areas around islands. So we will be presenting our initiative during the, let's say, 15 to 30 first minutes of this session, and then we will ask for your feedbacks, your question, your answers as well, your insights about the methodology that we will be presenting in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So yeah, this and the next one again. So yes, as I was saying, so this is an initiative financed by MAVA. We are a group of, let's say, implementing organization all around the Mediterranean that has experience with island conservation. That's how we identified ourselves and how we selected the members of this Mediterranean Island Collective. So this initiative is aimed at producing one strategy, followed by an action plan to improve the conservation of islands of every type, of every typology around the Mediterranean. We want this strategy to be connected with reality. We want this strategy to be reflecting the diversity of situation in the Mediterranean. So that's why we are here today, to speak, to face marine biologists, MPA managers, and regional representatives to present our methodology and for you to give us your feedback and tell us what do you think if you are not missing anything. Let's start. Sevani Painiandi, my colleagues from PIM Initiative, I give you the mic and the opportunity to explain how we are going to reach this strategy. Thank you, Sevani.
Thank you, Mathieu. So I am Sevani. I also worked at the initiative Small Island Mediterranean with Mathieu, and I am coordinating this initiative, this project, which is the Mediterranean Island Collective project. So we'll just go over the agenda for today's event. Thank you. We'll start with a presentation of the MIC project, and then we will have a little focus on one of the pilot projects happening in Cyprus Island. And then we'll move on to have a more detailed explanation of the strategy that is being drafted right now. I mean, that has been started long ago. And then we'll move on to the interaction part that Mathieu mentioned earlier. We will have, we would like to have your feedback, your contribution to this strategy that is being elaborated. And then we will end with some questions and comments from you or from participants online. Next slide, please. So what is the MIC project? So I would like maybe for you to picture, for example, several organizations, each working across the Mediterranean region, all within their geographical scope, with their own problematics, with their own stakeholders. So each one working differently across the Mediterranean region, and through a MAVA foundation, through a MAVA funding, these organizations got together, gathered to try to create collaboration to protect, to try to work together to protect small islands, nature on small islands in the Mediterranean. So this project was created like that, a consortium of partners getting together to try to elaborate a strategy built on the challenges they faced, past conservation efforts, and available tools and create a strategy and then an action plan that will be implemented after the strategy is drafted. So concretely, the project started in May 2021 and will end in September 2022 with funding from MAVA, but also some co-funding from the organizations or other initiatives happening in the region. Who are the partners? The network consists of 7 direct partners who also form part of the steering committee. We have the Conservatoire du Littoral in France. We have the IUCN Mediterranean. We have MedPan, who is the organizer of this event today. We have Maries Foundation from Spain, the PIM Initiative, the NGO working on a small island in the Mediterranean, Conservation Collective, and WWF from Greece. Next slide, please. And we also have indirect local partners. So you can see across this map, we have, they are all across the Mediterranean region, and they are the pilot sites that we'll talk about later. And they are mostly, these local partners are mostly MPA managers, NGOs, research institutions, researchers. They are very diverse, actually. Next slide, please. So the MIC project has 2 stages. The first one, we have a consultant has been hired in September, and the work will be to try to gather all the joint vision from the partners and from all stakeholders working in the Mediterranean region to try to elaborate a strategy and to identify common threats, challenges, and priorities. And then to elaborate elaborate an action plan based on the strategy, and also based on pilot projects that will be implemented after 2022. So how will they build up this strategy? It is through consultation phases. They will have meetings, they will have discussions. This event, for example, is also to contribute to elaborate the strategy. And the action plan will be mostly made of priority conservation areas with activities that will be carried out across the Mediterranean simultaneously. Next, please. And then the second phase, second stage step of the project are the pilot projects, which are projects happening across the Mediterranean region and that are already tackling major environmental challenges in their own area. So these projects have been selected based on their the fact that they are small innovative, and replicable. So these are very important characteristics because the outcomes of these pilot projects will feed the action plan that is being drafted by the consultant Smile. Next, please. These action plans, they mostly fall under 4 categories. So we have some actions that are mitigating invasive species impact. For example, in a small island in the north of Sardinia, you have eradication of house mouse that is happening, or eradication of opuntia in the south, in a small islet called Macario in the south of Sardinia. You have projects that fall under the category of island economical sustainability, for example, trying to find alternative tourism models. And then you have pilot projects that fall under actions addressing ultra-endangered endemic species. For example, we have a project on the Aeolian Islands near Sicilia, or trying to breed and safeguard a small lizard, the Podorsis. So this is one example. And we also have projects that fall under the landscape restoration. For example, on Paros Island in Greece, you have a project that is mainly focused on trying to rebuild all stone microdams to try to manage water scarcity on the island, and also to have hotspot biodiversity. Next, please. So just to sum up the MIC project, you have a first phase that is carried out by SMILO. So it's the small island organization who is the consultant that was hired to draft the strategy and also to have an action plan. And then the second phase, where you have the pilot projects whose outcomes will be able to feed the action plan, so that we can have a more realistic approach through the pilot projects. Next, please. So right now we're going to move on. On this map, you can see all the pilot projects of the MIC project. And we'll have a special focus today, a closer view with one of the pilot projects happening in Cyprus. And the speaker is Fatih HUSEYINOGLU. Sorry if I did not pronounce it well. So Fatih, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So you will present one of the pilot projects from the MIC.
Okay. So good evening, I would say. It's already dark here. So good afternoon for you. I don't know what's the situation there at the moment. Next slide. Let's start with the next slide, please. Okay. Well, let me first start with the title of the project, because the title tells a lot. Removal of 2 established alien species. Here we have established populations of some species, some alien species here. And on the left, you can see the lionfish, the famous lionfish. And on the right, you can see the long-spined sea urchin, which is Diadema setosum. And as I said, they have established species here. And so, next slide, please. Oh, well, the pictures are on top of each other. So, okay, anyway. Well, we are on the very right end of the map here, east of the east. And a few hundred kilometers south of us is the Suez Canal. Oh, okay, well, anyway. So, and all the surface currents are coming directly from the Suez Canal towards the island. Following the mainland, they're coming towards the island. We don't see it, it's a micro vortex, but there's a vortex in Famagusta, and funny, but we see the effects of that vortex in our dives in our observations. Next slide, please. And therefore, we have many alien species coming from the Red Sea, and we don't have only the fish, but we also have ascidians, mollusks, crustaceans, and we have sometimes when we make observational dives here, we mostly see alien species rather than native species. And next slide. Okay, are they bad? Or, I mean, don't they have any positive effects on the environment? Or it's a very, very long subject, but we want to tell you about one of our observations. The picture to the left is at one of our stations, and that's the diadema towards the left, and in between the spines, we have the juvenile damselfish, which is a native Mediterranean fish. And here what we observe in the northern coast of the island. On the northern shores, we see, most of the times we see damselfish in between diadema spines. But when we go to Famagusta Bay towards the east, towards southeast, we see the nine-striped cardinal fish, which is another Lesseps fish among the spines. And we believe it's because of the vortex, and the cardinal fish also will be moving here. We see them sometimes, but not as often as Famagusta Bay. So there are many different parameters we should be taking into account. Next slide, please. Okay, so we focused on two species, lionfish and diadema. They are both poisonous. Diadema is less poisonous. I mean, it has a less venom. So we chose two rocky reefs with a lot of crevices, because we observed that all these crevices are occupied by lionfish and diademas, which were formerly occupied by native fish and native marine sea life. So we chose two reefs, which is the Rasta Reef on the north, as you can see with the red circle, and the Gaelic Reef on the eastern shore. And what we do, we count basically all the fish. We use underwater visual sensors and we count all the fish. But for lionfish and diadema, we have a different counting procedure. We also note the habitat preference, size, behavior, and some other factors as well. And after 3 UVC counts of all the fish, next slide, please. We'll be starting to cull, to kill, to collect, let's say, to lionfish and diadema. Actually, we have been doing this for, since lionfish is here, it's our every weekend job like this. And after 6 months of regular removals, we're expecting that we're going to completely remove the diademas. We won't accept maybe some occasional ones every once in a month, and very few occasional lionfish. That's what I'm expecting on one of the reefs. And the other reef, the effects will be different because it's a series of rocky big reef system. The other one is like an island, like an isolated rocky reef in the middle of Posidonia beds. So we will have different results from both of these two of these reefs. And next slide, please. And what we try to achieve is we get some results, and after these results, we are going to try to implement these into MPAs or protected areas for these method of removing lionfish and diademas from the rocky crevices, and hopefully see these views again. That's a small crevice that I go almost every weekend, and now it's completely full of diademas and lionfish. That picture is about 5 years ago. And finally, I'd like to invite everybody to the workshop in Cyprus. The working title is Islands and Innovations. It's going to be in May 2022. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Fatih. So this is a very good example of the pilot projects that are happening inside the MIC project, because they can be, they're innovative, they can be replicable and upscale also across the Mediterranean region in other parts, and also at the same time. We'll move on to now a presentation, please the next slide. To the presentation of the ongoing work of the strategy that is being drafted by Smilo. He will give us more information. Sylvain, are you here? And Antonio?
Yes, yes, Vani.
Okay,
Can
so
you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you, so I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the MIC team for selecting Smilo to help facilitate and drive the definition of this strategy for the preservation of biodiversity on Mediterranean islands. Maybe, I don't know if the slide is on. I wanted first of all to present you our team. And in a few words, Smilo. Smilo is working worldwide, supporting island communities towards the definition of strategies, to action plans, to run the sustainable development of the territory. Our work is focused on the good governance of islands, of small islands in our case. For us, this good governance is first of all to have the public authorities, the private sectors, and the inhabitants, or work a lot with the civil society, sit together. This is the basis for good governance. And then our focus is on 5 themes. The first one being biodiversity, then water and water sanitation, waste treatment, also energy and landscapes. For these specific projects, we're teaming up with 2 international experts, one of which is here today with us, Antonio de Abreu. In a few words, we can say that he's a lifelong expert in terms of biodiversity conservation schemes, working in Micronesia, I mean, all around the world, but also in Mediterranean, in Europe as well. We will also, we joined forces with Pantelina Emalinidou. She's a doctor in on island legislation and regulations in the Mediterranean Europe. And as for the Smilo team part, myself, Sylvain Petit, so I'm the executive secretary of the association, but I have an expertise in the field of integrated management of resources on islands. So this is for the team. I was not supposed to be on the screen, so actually I put the pictures here, and I apologize for here being in the dark or like this. For us, the work is already started. We're working now at this point on the structure of the strategy, on the backbone of this document. As last week, we had a meeting, an event in the frame of our General Assembly to discuss some of the focus area and key themes that should be of the pillars of this strategy, and we'll get back to this in a minute. For us, the work will be the first stage will end in February with a first draft of the strategy. So now what we will be discussing with you today, and the ideas we want to get back from you and questions as well, is really, really the focus is on the strategy, not that at this point thinking about the action plan. I mean, we have it in mind, of course, but the focus is to put together this strategy. Next slide, please. So one of the things we need to clear, and one of the things we need to get some consensus is this one vision for this strategy. As it was said in the opening words by Mathieu, we need to be connected to reality. Thankfully, this project around the MIC team is built, as we've seen with Fatih, with some very concrete and practical projects that will be our reality check. We need to find a vision, and for us, this is what we've agreed so far, and this is what we've constructed our proposal to be part of this team on, is to work on a message with this strategy that would highlight the link between the protection and sustainable development. I mean, biodiversity must be seen as the key resource, the #1 resource we have that will enable us to build and to strengthen local island communities. One other message we have here is also that science and knowledge, even though they're scarce about islands, especially about small islands, doesn't mean that we cannot take action. What we want to do here is to find the means to strengthen local governance and to save the island ecosystem. We want to replace man and the local communities in this island ecosystem. So here are just two let's say, draft motto for this strategy that we've put together and that still need to be refined. And here, of course, we'll be more than welcome to hear from you. Let me just read them. It's island biodiversity in the Mediterranean, the key resource for resilient communities. Island biodiversity in the Mediterranean island, the link between nature and resilient communities. So keep this in mind and please, yes, reflect on that. Next slide, please. One of the other major questions we need to answer, to be as concrete as possible, is who are we building this strategy for? For whom? And definitely here today we have the chance to discuss with the MPA managers, co-managers, regional organizations as well, but we want to be heard also by some economic actors on the ground, civil society, policymakers, and academics. Again, here your thoughts on the who is it we should be addressing, and maybe how is more than welcome. Next slide, please. So here is a very long list of key themes. I mean, not that long, but maybe too long. And this is what we really would like to discuss with you at this point, and what is it we're trying to have a consensus on with the MIC team. So these are the pillars as we've designed them so far for this strategy. So let me run through them before we open the discussion. And so we want to increase awareness. We want to have more information, data about the Mediterranean islands. I think that we need also to promote the sustainable use of biodiversity at the local, regional, or national level. We need to improve capacities for biodiversity conservation, and as well as the political will. We need to promote an inclusive management and therefore having involvement of all the key stakeholders in the preparation. This is what is also on the work plan of the MIC, a lot of consultations with different actors. Want to work on the conservation and restoration of crucial biodiversity. And when saying that, we're talking about some key species, as we've seen the previous example, but also habitats, ecosystems. We need to take on board also the ecosystem services, of course. Then we need to strengthen regional and international cooperation. And we need to include the conservation of biodiversity in all public policies. So this is for the very fast run through the structuring of the strategy. I would like to invite my colleague Antonio maybe to add a few words before we go to the next slide and some of the questions, I think, or back to the mic team. Antonio, if you want, please.
Thank you, Sylvain. Good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for this opportunity. Just to add to what Sylvain mentioned, that during last week we had a meeting, a very interesting meeting with different stakeholders from different places around the Mediterranean, and they added. So this is already reflecting most of the ideas that were discussed with them, but they sent us some messages on keywords that I would like to add for our discussion today. One is knowledge. So not only knowledge in the way of producing and increasing the knowledge about what we have in the Mediterranean, about biodiversity, but also making knowledge available and usable by the different end users. The other keyword that was stressed was efficiency. Let's say that how this strategy can contribute for a more practical and efficient application of the principles and the means for nature conservation and biodiversity conservation. Monitoring is also a keyword for them, and especially means. So how this strategy can add and bring a capacity and financial support for making sure that it can be passed from the formulation to the concrete action level. The final question that was launched, and I am already anticipating some key issues for our discussion, is how this strategy can link and will be integrated with the existing strategies, whether at international level, at EU level, part of the Mediterranean islands, national and local existing strategies. So some of the participants stressed that they are a little bit confused, and let's say there is a sort of entropy with a lot of strategies, and they would like to have a clear indication from this strategy on how it will fit and will interact with the existing, how they can benefit and provide mutual support, as in the end all strategies for biodiversity are looking for the same goals. So basically these are some points that we are already considering and taking in our exercise, and we would like also to hear from you about not only the current point and situations and structure, but also about these specific points that I just brought from the discussion we had last week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Here, Mathieu speaking. Thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you, Sylvain. Do we have any thoughts in the audience about the question that were asked by Antonio about the key pillar, the key question that this strategy shouldn't miss? I let you think about that and raise your hands if you have some proposal that Smilo will have to answer. Before that, I'm asking a question to our panelists, IUCN and Smilo. By definition, islands are isolated territories. It means that when you want to work on an island, if you want to do field work, if you want also to attract high-level experts, well, you will need additional costs. In a nutshell, well, it's more expensive to work on an island than to work in the mainland. How this strategy will integrate this specificity of action? I don't know if anyone from the panel is able to answer to that.
Yeah, I can. That is a very interesting point. On the other hand, we know from biology and ecology that islands are the best models for studying and understanding biodiversity, not only from the structural point of view, dynamics, but all evolution. So they are real living laboratories for understanding the diversity of life and the mechanisms of isolation, speciation, and also the interactions of different levels, human pressures and environmental stress factors. Yeah, so although it is more expensive to work on islands, the benefits and the capacity to isolate the different and the complex factors that are under study can ensure that we can have more attention from the financing structures. So the idea also that islands are, let's say, advanced sentinels of for understanding global and real global issues like climate change and understanding of the trends of the ecosystems and the species can also be brought to the table in order to make sure that when looking to the islands, and in particular, I believe that we are talking about terrestrial environment, we need to consider not only the costs, but also the benefits, and making sure that the existing and future financial mechanisms can be made available for benefiting this the potential that the islands show as living laboratories. In any case, when we target the sea or the coastal environment, again, the costs there are more even higher, although they can provide reduced costs for both facilities, because a small island can be considered like a research vessel in itself. So it should be on the double sense. So calling the attention for the need of ensuring that we have enough resources, but at the same time showing that there are some fields or some activities that can benefit when from being developed on islands. But for sure, we need a lot of creativity and make sure that this should be included.
Thank you very much. Any question? Yes, please present yourself before asking a question.
Yeah, hi, Luis Hadjianu from Cyprus. I just wanted to comment, not make a question. Is exactly what was already mentioned, that sometimes or many times on islands things are less costly, especially if you use locals doing the actual research or any action. So I think there are many examples of lots of islands in the Mediterranean where there is local dynamic that can do the activities with much lower cost than well, people from the mainland coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. You're right. When you're speaking about island, you can speak about very small ones, and you can speak about island state like your islands. And of course, if you're involved local research center, well, it's maybe less expensive. We have another question over there. Thank you.
So, sorry, this is not a question. This is Mark from IUCN. Hello, Antonio, and it's just only a comment that I think it was mentioned, and I think it's important. It's the difference between islands and the rest of the countries in the mainland, and I think this is where we have the importance of to build an island strategy, because they're asking you why to build, how much this has to be joined to the rest, why it has to be different, why it has to be similar, how it has to contribute to the biodiversity outcomes or the Aichi targets or anything. And I think in the peculiarity of the islands also is regarding to how regulations are in place. And I remember the sample that was in a few weeks ago when I was in Baleares. It was the sample typical coming from there where they have invasive species, which is a snake. And at the national country, at the national in Spain, the species is protected. But in the island, it's invasive. So there is where the regulations at the EU, for example, doesn't allow to treat that species as invasive. So this is where the regulations have to be different for islands and have to be because they are creating a problem for the biodiversity of the islands. And I think that process should be integrated in the strategy itself to make it, because if we are trying to do even in protected areas or non-protected areas, that element should be there, well reflected. And maybe it's also a general thinking that maybe we should highlight why islands are so important, why we need to build this strategy for islands, particularly on that aspect first, and then we can go on why is the threats, what is the problems. Maybe I just open that question in general to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuda from Egypt. The first question is, do you really need a strategy? Because in every place now, you have national strategies, whether for CBD, for any other biodiversity-related conventions, whatever. You may need only action plan rather than strategy. This is number one. Number two, when you prepare strategy, you have to make homework, literature review about the whole issue. If you take non-indigenous species, for example, as far as I remember, in Caribbean, they did the same thing for many, many years. A lot of efforts were made to remove lionfish, but they were not successful, simply because once you remove a place, species, you have a vacant space that will be occupied straight away. God knows from where, it may be from the same species or other species, whether native species, whatever. This is a very, very complicated. And you need to know how serious is the problem. It is not just you remove it within 6 months and then you say it is okay. There is no strong evidence like that, because there are many, many species like crown of thorn, for example, in the Red Sea. We have this problem, and we thought by removing hundreds and thousands of them with tourists, with divers, whatever, to our surprise, they came from deep waters, and they found a vacant place, so they occupied. It is a very lengthy and complicated process, but certainly in a place like this, we are exploring all options based on sharing experience and things like that. Values of the islands should be highlighted because they are the remaining biodiversity in most of the Mediterranean countries. Coastal biodiversity, being impacted by huge number of issues, starting with pollution, alteration of the physical structure or whatever, etc. And so, from our experience in Egypt, the remaining biodiversity hotspots are the islands. So this is what you need to highlight it, not only in a way that this is Cyprus, this is Sardinia, this is whatever. No, I mean, you take the all over the picture of all Mediterranean island to a great extent. The other point which I found is a little bit to understand, you want straight away to jump to pilot projects and the connection between the different issues in these pilot projects. I couldn't understand. I mean, non-indigenous species, economics, and whatever. You need to harmonize all of this. And for me, the strategy without communication strategy to inform people about the value of the biodiversity of islands, for example, could be very, very important because you can get a lot of volunteers to work with you, whatever. But anyway, this is a very good initiative that we welcome. But I'm sorry if we have to intervene like this, but we are doing the best we can, just only to put things in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very direct question. So two questions, just to sum up. The first one, why we are doing this strategy? We could actually feel the Mediterranean with all the strategy that we made in the past. So why this one is useful? And the second one was how we can connect all the pillars of this strategy to make something relevant. Mar, you want to provide some answers, or it was another question?
I just wanted to clarify the question on the communication and the stuff. The project itself have a communication part, and it has the pilot projects that have been selected at the moment. They were just only projects that they needed a little bit of a help to, but they were already conducted. It's not the pilot projects that will be in the future. Are just only the ones that they were already ongoing. So we wanted to see if those with little efforts and little economic incentives could be picked up and bring on. But I don't think that they're gonna bring the horizontal regeneration from other sides. We just on the moment trying to do it like that. But just only feeding back on the communication, I think that is the part that we need on the knowledge that we have to develop for the strategy, and maybe Antonio and the colleagues can fill it in a little bit more on what they're doing on that part, because we wanted to see this.
Sylvain, maybe your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure I will answer this gentleman's comments and questions, but just to fill the discussion, I think the very interesting point in his reaction was asking about, I mean, being stricken by the fact that there are some pilot projects already running and that we're discussing this strategy now kind of in parallel. Think that it's very interesting actually for us to work, as we said before, on the to try and make it as explicit as possible why there is a high benefit on work on islands. That's what Antonio was touching on. And those pilot projects, they give us the bullets we need, the ammunition to showcase that, because in line with what the other colleague was saying, that on small islands, we have many things going on, many things that are going on and that actually do not, for the ones that are doing them, and I'm talking here for maybe smaller communities on small islands or even on bigger islands, they don't necessarily relate their actions to some of the international agenda objectives, being it climate change, the Paris Agreement, or being at the other level of the SDGs and things like that. People act for the good of their environment, of their communities, and for us, I think that this is part of what we're trying to do here. Try and help these actors better understand that actually what they do fits into some higher objectives and that they're on the good way. So there's a bit of of first, there is nothing to invent, but just to try and canalize some of the efforts that islanders are investing. And actually, a lot of these people and a lot of these examples are just pioneers of this biodiversity conservation, sustainable development that we all put in very structured international documents, but then that needs to eat the ground. Here we're trying to have this bottom-up and top-down discussion, try to meet here in the middle. That's how we see the job we're trying to achieve here, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much. Yeah, also to give my answer, well, island biodiversity is specific. As Marseille said just before, there's some species considered as invasive in islands that are protected in the mainland. So of course we need to adapt our conservation programs regarding where we are. So yes, according to us, of course, but I'm speaking in the name of the Mediterranean Small Islands Initiative. I will not tell you the contrary, of course, but yes, we need a specific strategy for islands. Also, concerning micro islands, we sometimes has the feeling that they are neglected, they are forgotten in national strategies, or even in strategical documents such as management plan of Natura 2000's areas, where we forgot to speak about these small islets in front of the mainlands. At least it occurred in France in some of areas that I know. And also people are not the same. Stakeholders are not structures as in the mainlands. We have specific research center in Cyprus with specific topics in Sicily, in these big islands that are not interested by the same issues than in the mainlands. So we have to use this capacity to address a specific strategy of conservation. We are arriving at the end of our sessions, but we still have 2 minutes to discuss. So yeah, we have a last question in the audience.
Hello, I am Damla from Cyprus, from Spot. We are a partner of one of the projects. I think one of the main problems of the islands, including islets, is invasive species. And I believe if we can, all the countries who has the pass to these islands or to these islets, can come up with a common strategy about how the travel limitations can be organized. I think that might be a great improvement for the islands, because, for example, I can say that you can go to Cyprus directly from the mainland, and actually there isn't a thorough check about what you're carrying. You can carry a plant species or whatsoever, and there isn't much limitations about that. So that's, in my opinion, that would be nice progress in conservation of the island biodiversity. And also, as you mentioned, islets are really important because we have specially protected areas, but these areas are really massively, intensively used by people, people swimming on the beach and whatsoever, but we can still see that migratory species, how small the islet is, they find refuge in these islets, but there isn't a common agreed legislation or conservation towards these islets as well. So maybe that these can be my suggestions to this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We keep that in mind. We have a last question from Egypt, or you're just scratching your heads?
I strongly believe on the value of communication, and simply because most of the MBA managers are not good in communicating with people, and even the issue of protected areas, why you declare a place as a protected areas and who will benefit from it and whatever, etc. And from our experience, I always say communication language. You need to find the language that you can communicate with fishermen, that they can benefit from you. You don't go and tell them I'm doing it for the protection of what, you know. The fisherman will say straight away, but these are the God creation. I mean, the God sent them to us. How can on earth, especially if they are migratory species, whether birds or fish, whatever, if I don't catch them, someone else will catch them. So you need to find a language how to communicate with them. The same thing when you speak to decision makers. They will never understand the value of conservation as such, but they can understand it if you use their own language. That means that decision makers can listen to you if you talk about investment projects, if you talk about gender issue, if you talk about education, health, whatever. This is a kind of communication language with different people depending on the need of everyone. This is my advice to you, because we have been through this process for long time, and we found that it's very useful. Communication language is very, very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this last remark. If we don't have another question, it's this last output is a good conclusion, I guess, and it brings us to the last part of the elaboration of the strategy, the promotion. We don't speak about that because that's the last part of our project, but we will have to promote at equally this strategy at the higher level in Europe, in regional conventions, and to adapt, as you said, our words to every kind of stakeholders. If we don't have any remarks, it's time for us to tell you thank you very much, and we'll take into account your inputs. Thank you very much. Antonio, Sylvain, Fatih, if you're still with us, thank you again.